So I did it, guys. I qualified for the Bassmasters Elite Series. One of my dreams fishing tournaments was to make it to this level, and I was able to qualify for it. And I want to show you what b.a.s.s sent us for qualifying for the Elite Series. Now, this was back in 2006, so it wasn't for this year. But with everything that's gone on in the tournament industry recently with the new MLF tournament series, I wanted to kind of take a look back because it reminded me so much of what was going on back then between B.a.s.s and FLW. And when B.a.s.s came out with this Elite Series, it really shook things up. So here's what we got when we qualified for the Elite Series in 2006. This was the first Elite Series that they ever had. It went from the Tour, which was 6 events, to this Elite Series, which was 11 events. This was our invitation. Every pro bass angler wants to compete with the best. Only an elite few have earned that opportunity. We've got this transparency here with the Elite logo. And this is from the then VP and General Manager of B.a.s.s, Don Rux and Trip Weldon. Consider yourself among the elite. As one of the world's premier professional bass fishermen, you are among a very exclusive group of anglers whose performance has earned them an invitation to compete in the inaugural Citgo Bassmasters Elite Series. For more information on this exclusive and groundbreaking tournament series, please consult the enclosed brochure. Congratulations. Thank you for your time and consideration. We hope to hear from you soon. Signed by Don Rux and Trip Weldon. So that was the invite that the maybe 200-300 anglers got who qualified for the Elite Series. So I'm pretty proud to be able to say I have one of those. So in addition to that, they also sent us this pamphlet, which was referred to in that invite. See how you measure up against the best, the Bassmaster Elite Series. And this just goes through the whole new format that they had in the Elite Series. Biggest payouts, 11 events, increased visibility. We have the whole payout structure here of the elites, the majors, the classic, which was $500,000 that year. First time we could earn $500,000 for fishing the Bassmasters Classic and winning it. Had the tournament schedule, which we'll look at a little bit later here. And then the qualifying criteria, and this is how I got in. 110 boaters qualify from the 2005 Bassmasters Open. The top 30 from the Central, Northern, and Southern boaters would qualify, and then the top 20 from the Western Open boaters would qualify. So I finished 8th in Northern Open points in 2005, and that's how I was able to qualify. Then if you were a Tour Pro or a past champion, you also would qualify based on a bunch of different exemptions here that would get you in. We had the format, which went to 4 days for the Elite Series, and just some changes here, point structures. Another way you could get in was through this wildcard event, which I was actually able to fish in 2006 as well, and unfortunately didn't qualify through that. But what I wanted to really focus on here was this here, the payment schedule and deposits. You were looking at $5,000 per tournament, which was, I think they were $1,925 or $1,940 for 6 events for the Tour in 2005, and then you went to 11 events at $5,000 each. And because of that, they had to institute this payment schedule. You'd pay your deposit in October of the year prior to the tournaments, and then in July, you'd have to have everything paid up in full through this payment schedule. And as you know, if you followed the sport back then, a lot of guys didn't make it to these final payments. They had to drop out because of the financial constraints. Another thing you want to kind of take a look at here is these deposits, when they have to be in by, because they did go ahead and extend that, which we'll look at here in a bit. And then this just talks about how they're raising the standards. The biggest thing was the wrapped boat. Basically gave them the ability to promote a sponsor similar to NASCAR with a big wrap to promote that sponsor's logo and their brand. Then it also gave anglers the ability to use their own boats, not a bass boat. B.a.s.s boat. They're all bass boats, but you know what I mean. Like some of those Triton, Citgo, Purelator ones where bass would use on the last days of the competition. This allowed them to run their own boats on those days to really promote themselves and their brand and their sponsors. So that's the measuring up against the best brochure that they gave us with this. Next thing I wanted to look at was your entry form here. This was the official Citgo Bassmaster Elite Series entry form. You'd have all your information, payment information, of course, and it was printed on, a little bit nicer than just standard paper, some cardstock. Then you had this angler profile you'd have to fill out at the end of it here. Just basic stuff that they'd use for the website, some personal info, and then your current sponsors along with contact name and addresses. Very interesting that they want their name and address, as you probably saw through following Bass that many times an angler would bring in a sponsor and then they'd become a sponsor of Bass in the meantime. So interesting that they have that on there. So that's your entry form. Okay, and then we have our participation agreement. And this basically is the agreement that you're signing to fish the Elite Series, to adhere to the rules that are outlined in here. And there's a whole bunch, just, some basic tournament rules. And then it kind of gets interesting, the clothing that Bass would provide for you. And then this rule here as well, with patches on your clothing. And I'm not going to read through these, but those are the two controversial ones that had a lot of anglers up in arms. This was the boat guideline that they'd have for your wrap, where your logo placement would have to be for Bass reserved logos and the angler name, the windshield, and then here being the main spot. Also the live well lid, the inside of the live well lid was reserved for Bass decals. So every time, you'd go to throw a fish in your live well, some of their sponsors are getting promoted and possibly not yours. And then your jersey guideline here. Now this was very controversial. This is why a lot of people left Bass and went to go and fish FLW, and that led Bass to send out a amended participation agreement, which I want to show you this next package they sent to us. So the next thing we got was in October of 2005, and it was the amended participation agreement to this one here, which was originally sent out. Now this one here, what it gave us in here was some changes to those rules 23 and 24. And the main issue, I'm actually going to flip ahead to the boats. Main issue was that Bush Shootout logo, which is, you can see there on the left, which would be put on your windshield and then also on your jersey. And a lot of anglers, were against that. A lot of them, don't drink and didn't want to support, an alcoholic company, which, is understandable. They've got their morals that they want to stand behind, and I definitely would agree with those. So you can understand why they would have issues with that. Now, if they didn't do that, what Bass said, if they didn't wear those logos on their jersey or put them on their boat, that was fine. They could opt out. They could not elect to participate in contingency programs. Bass would give them a logo, just like a Bass patch, their standard logo or Elite Series logo, something like that, to put in that contingency program place. But the angler would be excluded from any benefits such as prize purse or qualification for supplement tournaments, and with any contingency program. So with that contingency program, I should say. So that was one thing that really got a lot of people ticked off. You could still, participate in the Elite Series, but unfortunately you weren't getting any extra money for these contingency programs. Now, the other thing, because of that, they didn't want a lot of anglers fishing Bass and FLW, or at least promoting FLW. So they added into Rule 24 here, no competitive tournament trail logos or identity will be allowed on uniforms and or the boat packages. So that basically was saying, if you're fishing Bass and FLW, you better have two jerseys and you better put a sticker over your FLW logo on your boat if you had one. One other thing that they did remove was the live well, inside live well lids, because if you've seen those Ranger boat stickers, just about every Ranger boat that was a tournament angler had those stickers in there. So you throw a fish in and Ranger boats gets promoted. So they let that be open for an angler to promote it as they wished. So that was the new participation agreement. It also said in there, this is the final copy. We're not putting out another one. So you're adhering to this or you're not fishing, basically. They also sent a CD, which we'll look at in a sec. And then they also sent this letter. And this letter was from Don Rux, who we got the invitation from. So I'm just going to read a bit of it. I won't bore you with everything. It kind of just outlines, some of the changes and the attitude at Bass. So, dear Elite Series angler, it's been an interesting few weeks and months. During that time, we here at Bass, our professional anglers, sponsors, members, fans, and other stakeholders have worked to refine and redefine the highest level of our sport. goes on just to talk about it a little bit, talks about the rule changes that are in this new policy, and it talks about Rule 24, 25. That's 23 and 24, the main things that have changed. Now up here at the top, registration for the Citgo Bassmasters Elite Series will continue through the extended deposit date of November 1st, 2005. We hope you'll be joining us for the biggest, most lucrative, and most prestigious tournament trail ever launched. And goes just through the CD, which I'll look at here in a second. And at the end here, I'd like to remind each of you that life is a journey, not a destination. I hope you'll join me in this journey as we redefine the sport of professional fishing, professional bass fishing, and take it to a new age of prosperity and prestige. Together we'll get there. Signed, Don Rux. So like I mentioned, the other thing in there was this CD, and this was a sponsor recruitment presentation that Bass supplied to all their anglers. So let's take a look and I'll show you what was on this. Okay, so this is the Elite Series sponsorship proposal. And basically, here's what it is. It's all about how you can get a sponsor. So first couple slides here, they're about bass fishing, the demographics, and the markets. You know, how many millions of people fish throughout the year. More Americans fish than play tennis or golf combined. They spend a lot of money. There's a lot of big companies that bass fishing as a company would be ahead of on a Fortune 500 list, you know, so it is a very, very big market that sponsors can get a lot of grassroots type advertising with. You know, it goes on to talk about freshwater fishing. Anglers, you know, they account for 83% of the sport fishing population. You know, which obviously bass fishing is going to be among. Then it gets more specific right into bass fishing, talking about, you know, almost 11 million bass anglers in the state, how it's the #1 fish. And, you know, they spend 160 million days on the water bass fishing combined. This slide here was really interesting to me. Look at how much money is being spent on just rods, reels, tackle, and electronics. You know, over $700 million, and even boat fuel, almost $200 million. And that was back when, you know, fuel was about $2 a gallon. So can't imagine what you'd be spending on it now. Next slide talks about the relationship of ESPN and how that's the selling point for a lot of elite anglers to market themselves to sponsors. And one interesting note is that b.a.s.s and the Elite Series was ESPN's first professional sports league. So there's a bunch of slides in here just about the demographics of a Bass Saturday viewer, internet viewer, magazine reader, and then just bass fishermen. Basically, in a nutshell, a bass fisherman is a white man. Chances are he's married, makes about 50 grand a year, and he's in his 40s. Talks a little bit here about the return on investment that a sponsor could potentially get with Bass members spending 3 times more money annually on the sport than an average angler would. Just a list of some of their current sponsors here, and obviously some very big companies involved with that. This is one thing I was really impressed with the Elite Series, is building a national sport. And as you can see, all the way from New York down through the east coast of Florida, through the mid south, and then even into Texas. And what I'd find really interesting would be if we could take a look at this map now in 2018, all the destinations that Bass has visited. It would really fill up the US for the most part. And just about anywhere that there are bass, they have gone. And being a national sport, this is how they're going to reach people nationally through different events, obviously the tournaments, the ESPN television coverage, print, internet, and highway impressions. And that was one thing that was my favorite, man. Back then you heard about highway impressions so much and how much money a rap was going to develop for a sponsor. Now the presentation kind of goes into just these things in a little bit more detail, so if you want to read through this, you can just pause it and go through each slide. One of the biggest pushes we saw during this time in the sport was getting non-endemic sponsors, you know, so companies outside the fishing industry, and they could use the anglers that they sponsored as spokespersons for the brand or brand ambassadors. And then during the bass events, the brand would receive exposure there as well. But you know, we heard a lot about customer hospitality, employee incentives, that type of stuff for anglers to be used for those purposes. And then Bass also was going to give each Elite Series angler 2 reports throughout the year to just show them how much exposure, especially on ESPN2, that each angler would have received, so their sponsors could kind of get a value on what their investment was. Then they leave a blank page here for you to add some personal information to this, so when you go to pitch it to a sponsor, they can learn a little bit about yourself as well. So there you go, guys. That's what we got in 2006 for qualifying for the Bassmasters Elite Series. I really hope you guys enjoyed this video. I know it's a little different for what my channel's all about, but this is something, you know, that's part of me, and really glad that I was able to qualify for this Elite Series and share this video with you.